Welcome to the desk of the Executive Director at Back Bay Mission. I'm James Pennington, and this is Sarah Smith, who's with me today. Sarah Smith is our outreach worker, Home at Last program manager, and we're really happy. I'm happy to be here talking with her because she's a sheer delight, and she'll take this away and she'll talk and talk and talk, right? Because she always has a lot to say about the work she does. And actually today we're really at the entrance of the woods to the golf course, correct? And this is a golf course where a lot of our folks who are unsheltered live, and they set up their kind of semi-permanent dwellings. And we're going to go today and distribute blankets. Anything else we're distributing?
Information.
We
can get their names, we can put them on housing lists, we can go back and do food stamp applications for them. Pretty much any services we can bring them out to the woods today. But specifically we had a wonderful donation of blankets today, so
oh, that's great.
Spreading the wealth. Yeah.
That's great. And it's a beautiful day here in Biloxi. It's probably 60 some degrees, sunny, absolutely clear blue skies. So we're happy to be out here in the woods, and hopefully I won't run across a snake this time on this visit, right?
Yeah, I won't be a good protector.
No. So I have a couple other questions though. We're going to go off on a different tangent. Today on our way here we stopped at Making Groceries, which is a plant-based restaurant, relatively new, here on the coast, and it was actually at the museum before that. And we know the owner and the owner's husband, and they are mixed race couple.
Yes.
And of course, some of you may know Sarah is also in a mixed race marriage, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I did ask the owner of Making Groceries. I said, I'm not sure how your husband Corey identifies, because I've known Corey, I've talked to Corey, but he would be very light-skinned. And has unique features, and so she said, well, he identifies as black. And so I think part of our conversation today that I want to share is allowing people to identify how they choose to identify, right? Which is exactly what we do here at Back Bay Mission. If somebody wants to identify as unsheltered, or black, or green, or purple, or schizophrenic, right?
Whatever you are, be it.
Whatever you are, be it. And if there's anything I've kind of learned about Sarah in my few months here, is she really reinforces that. She is her own person, she is who she is, and that's a beautiful gift to the world. So I want to ask Sarah, and I guess the other thing I want to say too is Hollis happened to be there, which is Sarah's husband, at Making Groceries, and we were talking about how people identify. I asked that question, and then I said, well, Hollis, I really identify you by your uniform as a police officer, right? So I don't see that he's black, but I see him first as a police officer. And I think, you know, we can't ignore color. Back in the good old days, with race and racism, and I'm not sure they're the good old days, but they're the old days, we used to talk about race from a perspective, oh, I'm colorblind. I don't see Sarah white. I don't see Kevin as somebody who's from an Asian community or Asian descent, right? I see people, I don't recognize color, but really the move now has been to recognize color, to recognize difference, to recognize diversity, and to celebrate that diversity, and then learn and hear the stories of people. So what have you learned by being married to a black police officer, I guess I'd ask?
I don't know everything.
You don't know everything?
I don't know everything. I have to, and we also have 4 biracial stepchildren. Their father's black, their mother's white. So for me, it's allowing them, it's really funny because they argue over who's the blackest, who's the whitest. You don't look black, but you look black. And we had a conversation the other day about what bubble they would check in on a Scantron. Are you African? I mean, everybody wants to put you in a box, right? Like you can't be both because there's no room for 2 check marks on Scantron. So for me, when I first met them, and we were having conversations, they used terms that I would have thought as an African American were offensive or wrong. So I would say, oh, you can't say that. That's you're setting your people back, things like that. And actually, Dr. Graham, the previous executive director, she was like, you have to allow them to be who they are and not interfere. And I was like, that's hard for me to not interfere sometimes. And so that began a journey of trying to understand and educate myself, because it's really not their job to educate me. It's my job to educate myself and to have uncomfortable conversations. It's really funny because when we go in public, I'll always see people looking at us. I'll specifically remember this woman in New Orleans told me she hated biracial couples. This black lady told me she absolutely hated biracial couples but loved my hat. And I was like, well, you just have a great day.
Wow.
So I've had experiences like at the Coliseum at the Anthony Hamilton concert. Him and I were there. I would say I was a minority probably, and when I sat down, this lady like picked her purse up and moved away from me, and I thought, my goodness, this is what people go through every day, you know. And
Yeah.
my family, I've had parts of my family disown me over this relationship this marriage that I'm in now, and the choices that I've made. So for me, it's been a lot of trying to expose them to him, and because my grandfather's 95. He grew up in that world, you know. There's a lot of dust with those cars. So it's really, I think, about educating myself, not taking people's comments personally. They're not angry at me. They're angry at other things, but they're not angry with me. I get a lot of stares. Get a lot of, I don't know, from both sides. It's not just blacks and it's not just whites. I get a lot of criticism from both sides of the fence, which has been interesting.
Well, it's kind of been interesting. For me, this topic is kind of always on the surface, especially because we've been going through the pandemic. You know, we've also had racial inequities surface, the abuse of young black men or black men in general and black women. And so just before we gathered to go out to the woods, I was with a Chisholm UCC group that meets for an hour to talk about. We read all this material and then we talk about racism, we talk about the systems, we talk about how to dismantle it as individuals that work in social service within a United Church of Christ framework. And it's really interesting because right now we have the whole Rittenhouse decision, right? We have a lot of things that are happening, what happened in Kenosha, and what happened in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And these are all really challenging, kind of the way we look at things and the way we embrace the world and the way we identify too. And really hearing and listening to each other's stories is really critical, and not twisting those stories, right? So I think that's very, very important. So those are some things I'd like you to think about, especially as Sarah and I have shared a bit, that to really celebrate diversity, sink really deep into the stories, hear someone else's story, and also let people identify for who they are, right? And like Sarah, be kind of a lifelong learner, because she said, I've learned a lot in the very beginning, right? Like, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really, really important to be a lifelong learner, be open, be kind of like a sponge, and listen to people, hear their stories, just like you heard a bit of Sarah's story today. And you get to hear a lot of my story all the other weeks, right?
Be willing to listen.
Yeah,
and
be
to
willing
hear.
to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for living into that with your kids, because I had an opportunity to kind of see Sarah in action with her kids several times, but especially at the walk, and realize how much you really connect with your kids, with your stepkids and your own birth children.
Yes.
And how beautiful that is, right? To just let them live into them true selves and let them be who they are.
I love it. I love taking them to the black barber shop that they go to and experiencing that culture. You know, it's my husband's always telling me, you just don't know until you go to a black barber shop. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. So I take them down there and I'm like, hey, this is kind of fun. They're like their own community, and they look out for each other. And this little boy was in there and he was getting shaved bald, and that was his punishment by his mom. They dropped him at the barber shop and shaved him bald. I'm like, I was just had the best time down there, but I want them to be whoever they are. I don't care what box they check, character, not color. I wish more people would focus on, you know, when we say we don't see color, we'll focus on people's character instead, and get to know them for who they are. This is my first biracial relationship I've ever been in. I came from a predominantly white town in a very sort of racist background, not me personally, but within my family. It's a lot to start having those conversations when you grow up in that lifestyle and you don't know that there's anything other than what you've been taught from birth. And saying you're doing it wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you need to educate yourself and work on being part of the solution and not the problem.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yep.
That's for sure. So that's kind of what we're about at Back Bay Mission, is really being a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. And I think that goes for all aspects of our lives, our relationships, the organizations, the businesses, or the work that we do with our hands, but also the work that we do with our hearts and with our relationship with family and friends. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Sarah, for taking this time out of your incredibly busy day.
Yeah. Hopefully there'll be a next week if there's no massive snakes.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
we haven't missed a week yet.
Yeah, if we don't get pulled down by a snake, yeah, we'll be good. So, thank you for joining us. Have a blessed day, and as always, we would love your support as far as your prayers, but also support as far as your finances. So, have a great day.